Admiral Korvanax, Supreme Commander of the Galactic Hegemony's 7th Conquest Fleet, was bored out of his three minds. The bridge of his planet-killer flagship, the inevitable doom, armed with the usual efficiency as his crew of various species tapped away at consoles, monitored screens, and generally looked busy whenever he glanced their way. "Another report, sir," announced Lieutenant Grask, his tentacles quivering slightly as he approached with a data pad. "Scout vessels have identified a previously uncatalogued species on a backwater world in Sector 8721. Korvanax sighed dramatically. "And why, exactly, should I care about the 47th primitive species we've discovered this month? Some of us have actual conquests to plan." Well, Sir Grask paused, his orange skin flushing a deeper shade of embarrassment. "They call themselves humans, and they've developed rudimentary space travel and nuclear capabilities." Korvanax snorted, a sound that resembled a vacuum cleaner inhaling a rubber duck. "Oh my, nuclear capabilities? How terrifying. Should I alert the Empress that we might get a strongly worded letter?" The bridge crew erupted in laughter, as they always did when the Admiral made even his most mediocre jokes. "What's their planetary defense system?" Korvanax asked, absently picking at his razor-sharp teeth with a ceremonial dagger. "They have none, sir. The planet is divided into approximately 200 separate governing entities with individual military forces." "Divided?" Korvanax perked up. "Well, that makes things simple. Add them to the collection. Send in the 44th Infantry Division. That should be sufficient overkill." "Sir? Just one division?" Grask seemed concerned. "Standard protocol for new acquisitions is." "Or do I look like I need to follow standard protocol for a bunch of nuclear-wielding apes who haven't even unified their planet?" Korvanax interrupted. "This Earth will make a lovely vacation spot for my third wife once we've pacified it. Consider it a weekend project, Lieutenant." Grask nodded obediently and scurried away to prepare the invasion force, blissfully unaware that he was about to help make the greatest military miscalculation in the 12,000-year history of the hegemony. 3 solar cycles later, Admiral Korvanax lounged in his command chair, sipping a bubbling pink liquid from a goblet made from the skull of the last species that had dared to resist the hegemony. The 44th Infantry Division, 5,000 troops, 200 assault vehicles, and 50 atmospheric fighters had deployed to the human planet. For any primitive world, this force represented spectacular overkill, like using a supernova to light a candle. "Status report on the Earth acquisition?" Korvanax called out, barely interested. He was more focused on which of his vacation estates would receive the exotic human specimens he planned to collect. Communications Officer Prill cleared her throat nervously. "Sir, we've lost contact with Ground Commander Vazix." "Temporary atmospheric interference," Korvanax waved dismissively. "Try again." "We've been trying for 6 hours, sir." "The last transmission was concerning." Korvanax narrowed all 4 of his eyes. "Define concerning, Officer Prill." "Perhaps you should hear it yourself," she replied, tapping her console with trembling digits. The gravelly voice of Commander Vazix burst through the speakers. "Retreat. Full retreat. They have weapons that by the Empress. They're inside the perimeter. How did they? The transmission dissolved into weapons fire and screaming." Korvanax spilled his drink as he bolted upright. "What in the 7 hells of Malgoria is going on down there?" The tactical display showed red dots, his troops disappearing at an alarming rate. Within moments, the entire Northern Hemisphere deployment was gone. "Southern Hemisphere forces report heavy casualties," Lieutenant Grask announced, his voice quavering. "They're requesting immediate extraction." "Impossible." Korvanax slammed his fist on the armrest. "These are primitives. They throw rocks and shoot chemical projectiles." Strategic Officer Nix turned from her console, face ashen. "Sir, the humans are using our own dropships against us. They figured out the controls." "In hours?" Korvanax bellowed. "Minutes, actually," Nix corrected, then winced as the Admiral's face contorted with rage. The ship's AI announced with irritating calm, "Alert. Human aircraft approaching orbital position. They appear to have retrofitted our weapons technology to their primitive vessels." Korvanax stared at the viewscreen in disbelief as swarms of clearly human-made aircraft, sporting hastily attached hegemony weaponry, rose through the atmosphere. "Get us out of here," he shrieked, dignity forgotten. Full retreat. 12 hours later, Admiral Korvanax stood before the Emergency Council of the Galactic Hegemony, his normally immaculate uniform singed and his pride even more severely burned. "You lost an entire division?" Grand Counselor Zephram's voice echoed through the massive chamber. "To primitives?" "They're not what our intelligence suggested," Korvanax replied stiffly. "They adapt quickly." "Define quickly," demanded War Minister Thorne, her ridge of spines flaring with anger. "They captured our technology, reverse-engineered the basic principles, and deployed it against us within hours," Korvanax admitted. The council chamber erupted into alarmed murmurs. Science Director Uvex leaned forward. "That's biologically impossible. No species can process new information that rapidly." "Tell that to the 3 cruisers they destroyed," Korvanax replied bitterly. "Using our weapons, mounted on craft made of primitive metals and fossil fuels." The Empress herself, rarely seen at council meetings, rose from her throne. The room fell silent immediately. "I want to know everything about these humans," she hissed. "And I want to know how a species that hasn't even unified its own planet just handed the hegemony its first military defeat in 2,000 years." The Grand Strategy Room of the Hegemony Council buzzed with tension as Intelligence Officer Plex Nar, a thin, blue-skinned being with 7 fingers on each hand, activated the holographic display. The highest-ranking military and political leaders of the Galactic Hegemony leaned forward in their anti-gravity seats, their collective anxiety palpable in the recycled air. Distinguished members of the Council, Plex Nar began, adjusting his ceremonial intelligence core sash. "But I have completed my preliminary analysis of the human resistance that decimated our 44th Infantry Division." Admiral Korvanax slumped in his seat, having aged what appeared to be several decades in just days. "Get on with it, Plex Nar. Tell us how a bunch of primates managed to humiliate the greatest military force in 17 galaxies." "Well, sir," Plex Nar cleared his throat, a sound like marbles rolling down a metal tube, "it appears we encountered something the humans call NATO." "NATO?" repeated War Minister Thorne. "Is that their unified planetary defense force?" "That's the problem, Minister," Plex Nar replied, tapping his control pad. The hologram shifted to show a global map divided into colorful sections. NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's just one of dozens of military alliances on their planet. The room fell silent. "One of dozens?" "Empress," Solara whispered, her luminescent skin pulsing with concern. "Correct, Your Magnificence," Plex Nar confirmed, highlighting different regions. "NATO covers only this area. Then there's CSTO ANZUS, the African Union Forces, ASEAN allied militaries, and approximately 27 other significant military coalitions." Science Director Uvex snorted in disbelief. "That's ridiculous. How do they coordinate? Who commands their global response?" "No one," Plex Nar said simply. "They have no unified command structure." "That's even worse," bellowed Admiral Korvanax, standing suddenly. "Do you understand what this means? We didn't face their military. We faced a military. One of many." Rask, who had been promoted to captain following the debacle, raised a tentacle. "Could this explain their adaptability? Perhaps competition drives their innovation." "Precisely," Plex Nar nodded, bringing up footage of human soldiers adapting hegemony technology. "My team has been monitoring their communication networks. Apparently, after we retreated, military organizations that weren't even involved in the battle began arguing about who would have defeated us faster. General Vrexus, commander of the elite Death's Harbinger Regiment, blinked all three of his eyes in succession. They're competing with each other over who kills us better. It gets worse, Plexnar continued, bringing up new data streams. We've intercepted communications from something called DARPA and another entity called Skunkworks. I believe they're already improving on our weapons designs. Improving? Science Director Uvex squeaked, her respiratory sacs inflating in alarm. Yes, their scientists are calling our technology neat but inefficient, one human engineer said, and I quote, "Whoever designed this warp drive clearly never heard of quantum entanglement." Poor Minister Thorne slammed her appendage on the table. Impossible. Our technology is pinnacle level. That's not all, Plexnar continued, his voice growing increasingly strained. This report indicates that humans have something called weekend warriors and reservists, apparently soldiers who only fight part-time. The council exchanged horrified glances. Part-time soldiers? Admiral Korvanax repeated incredulously. What do they do with the rest of their time? Ordinary jobs, it seems. One of the pilots who shot down our cruiser lists his occupation as dental hygienist. The Empress rose slowly from her throne, her voice barely audible. Are you telling me that a part-time tooth cleaner destroyed a Hegemony battlecruiser? Yes, Your Magnificence, Plexnar confirmed. And apparently he's quite disappointed he'll miss something called a barbecue this weekend because of, quote, all this alien invasion nonsense. Captain Grask fainted. After much debate, the Hegemony Council reluctantly approved a high-risk intelligence-gathering operation. Agent Tarek Brill, the Hegemony's most accomplished spy who had successfully infiltrated 12 different species, underwent extensive genetic modification to appear human. 6 painful weeks of surgery later, he found himself on Earth with falsified identity documents, a crash course in human languages, and a sinking feeling that he'd drawn the shortest tentacle in the intelligence division. His first encrypted transmission arrived 3 Earth days after deployment. In mission log. Day 3. Have established cover identity as Todd Johnson from Nebraska. Humans appear obsessed with location of origin. Have been asked, where are you from 17 times. Currently positioned in metropolitan area called New York City. Will begin assessment of military capabilities tomorrow. Note, humans consume liquid called coffee in quantities that would kill any reasonable species. Requesting hazard pay. By day 7, Brill's reports took on a more frustrated tone. Mission log, day 7. Humans make no sense. They spend hours staring at devices showing other humans doing ordinary things. They keep small animals in their dwellings and speak to them as if they understand. Most disturbing. They voluntarily submerge themselves in large bodies of water for enjoyment. Have they no survival instincts? Still no useful military intelligence. The council grew increasingly impatient until day 14, when Brill's transmission turned serious. Urgent, have discovered critical intelligence. Humans are constantly at war with each other over resources, ideology, territory, and something called sports teams. Yet, when I suggested to my human friend Dave that aliens might attack Earth, he said, and I quote, "Oh man, we'd forget all our differences real quick if those space jerks showed up." This explains everything. They fight each other because they have no worthy adversaries, and we have inadvertently united them. Admiral Korvanax ordered Brill to focus on assessing their technological capabilities. 3 days later, the agent's panicked transmission left the council in stunned silence. Urgency. Humans are even more dangerous than we thought. They have museums celebrating their warfare evolution. They display primitive weapons with plaques explaining how they've improved killing efficiency over time. They call periods of technological development industrial revolutions and have had several. Most concerning, I observed a child's educational program explaining how humans went from first flight to landing on their moon in 66 years. Their adaptation rate is not just biological, it's cultural. Brill's final transmission came just hours later. Abort mission. I repeat, abort mission. I've been in a building called a sports bar where humans gather to consume toxic beverages and watch competitive activities. Someone recognized me from news footage of our attack, but instead of capturing me, they bought me a beer and asked detailed questions about our ship propulsion systems. A female human called Janet offered to show me a good time if I explained our weapon capabilities. They're not afraid. They're curious. They want to understand us to better defeat us. Extract me immediately or wait, someone suggesting we go to a place called Area 51-0. Why are they all laughing? The transmission ended abruptly. Agent Brill was never heard from again. In the council chamber, War Minister Thorne's voice was barely audible. So when they captured our spy, instead of torturing him for information, they befriended him and got him drunk? It's worse than torture, whispered Science Director Uvex. It's psychological warfare at its finest. The Galactic Hegemony had never known defeat in 12 millennia of conquest. The loss of a single division to a primitive species was an anomaly, a statistical error, an embarrassment to be corrected with overwhelming force. At least, that's what Admiral Korvanax told himself as he stood on the bridge of the super dreadnought Eternal Subjugation, surrounded by the largest invasion fleet assembled in 3 centuries. This time, we leave nothing to chance, Korvanax announced to his senior staff. 17 capital ships, 500,000 ground troops, 2,000 atmospheric fighters. The humans will be a footnote in our historical archives by dinner time. Strategic Officer Nix cleared her throat nervously. Admiral, perhaps we should consider the diplomatic approach suggested by diplomacy? Korvanax thundered, his facial ridges flushing purple with rage. With primitives who humiliated us. The Empress herself has authorized this mission. We will crush them so thoroughly that the universe will forget they ever existed. The fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, blotting out Earth's sun from the perspective of the tiny blue planet. Korvanax allowed himself a smug smile as planetary sensors would undoubtedly detect the overwhelming force poised above them. Begin the assault, he commanded. Full spectrum attack. Show no mercy. What followed would later be described in classified hegemony records as the 17 hours of horror. The first wave of dropships entered the atmosphere confidently, only to encounter what humans called cell phone towers hastily modified into energy disruptors using technology reverse-engineered from the first battle. How did they even know about atmospheric vulnerability points? Screamed Korvanax as he watched 300 ships disintegrate simultaneously. The ground assault fared even worse. Humans had abandoned conventional warfare entirely. Instead, hegemony troops found themselves ambushed by civilians wearing makeshift armor, wielding improvised weapons alongside military hardware. Every human dwelling became a fortress, every civilian a potential combatant. Sir, we're receiving unusual communication from the planet, Lieutenant Frax reported, confusion evident in his 8 eyes. Put it through, Korvanax ordered. A human voice, laughing heartily, filled the command bridge. Hey there, space jerks. This is Bobby from the Milwaukee Amateur Rocketry Club. Me and the boys figured out your shield frequencies. Pretty basic modulation, honestly. Anyway, look up. Korvanax glanced at the tactical display in time to see 50 small objects barely more than toys by hegemony standards rising from the planet's surface. Each was piloted by what intelligence identified as hobbyists, humans who built rockets for fun. Sir, those projectiles are those homemade bombs? Captain Grask shrieked, his color changing to panic white. Impossible. Their primitive explosives can't harm a capital ship, Korvanax declared. The tactical officer turned, horror etched on her features. They're not using their explosives, sir. They've copied our antimatter containment designs and improved them. The first hobby rocket struck the dreadnought merciless victory, bypassing shields calibrated to stop military-grade weapons. The resulting explosion tore the massive ship in half as if it were made of paper. Full retreat. Korvanax ordered, panic finally overtaking his arrogance. Get us out of this system immediately. The hyperspace engines are offline, sir, engineering reported. Human hackers have accessed our network. They're sending oh no. What? What? Korvanax demanded. They're sending us something called cat videos and rickrolls in quantities that are overwhelming our systems. The bridge view screen flickered to life with an image of a small furry earth creature batting its string, followed by a human male with red hair dancing. The ship's AI began to malfunction, broadcasting music throughout all decks, never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down. As the massive flagship drifted helplessly, Admiral Korvanax watched in horror as the tactical display showed human forces, military and civilian alike, converging on his trapped fleet. The last transmission he sent to Hegemony High Command was brief. They're coming. Nothing works against them. The humans don't just fight, they enjoy it. May the Empress forgive us for awakening this species. The transmission ended as a weekend hobbyist rocket, modified with alien technology and piloted by a high school physics teacher, it breached the hull of the Eternal Subjugation. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council was held in the bunker of last resort, deep beneath the surface of the Hegemony capital world. Never in 12,000 years had this facility been used. It was designed for extinction-level events, apocalyptic scenarios, and the collapse of civilization. No one had anticipated activating it because of a single species on a single backwater planet. The surviving leadership filed in silently, their usual pomp and ceremony abandoned. Admiral Korvanax was conspicuously absent, presumed captured or dead along with 90% of the invasion force. Of 17 capital ships, only 2 had limped back to Hegemony space, their crews babbling about soccer moms with plasma cannons and teenagers hacking thousand-year-old encryption in minutes. Empress Solara, her luminescence dimmed by stress, took her place at the head of the black obsidian table. Give me something, anything. That explains how we lost the most powerful fleet in the galaxy to a species that hasn't even colonized their own solar system yet. Intelligence Officer Plex Nar, now promoted to director following the previous director's nervous breakdown, stepped forward with a data crystal. His hands trembled as he inserted it into the holographic projector. Your Magnificence, distinguished council members, what I'm about to show you was recovered from the black box of the dreadnought Inevitable Dominance before it was converted into something humans call a shopping mall. The hologram flickered to life, showing human military bases, research facilities, and cities. As you can see, Plexnar continued, we've compiled a comprehensive analysis of human military technology. And we've made a disturbing discovery. Science Director Uvex leaned forward. What discovery? The humans defeated our first and second invasion forces while using what they internally classify as outdated technology, Plexnar said, his voice cracking. Their most advanced weapons systems were never deployed against us. A stunned silence fell over the room. That's impossible, War Minister Thorne whispered. There's more, Plexnar continued, changing the hologram to show intercepted human communications. Since capturing our technology, the humans have entered what they're calling a technological renaissance. They've already improved our FTL drives by 40% efficiency. They're referring to our weapons systems as cute and a good starting point. Captain Grask, now the highest-ranking surviving fleet officer, buried his face in his tentacles. By the void, what have we awakened? This transmission was intercepted just 3 hours ago, Plexnar said, activating the final recording. A human voice, casual and cheerful, filled the bunker. Hey, Professor Williams, check this out. I used the alien power core principles to create a clean energy source for my daughter's science fair project. Oh! And the military guys want to know if we can scale it up to power their new fleet. Apparently they're planning to drop by some nearby star systems to say hello. Isn't that awesome? Humanity's going interstellar, baby. The recording ended. No one spoke for several long moments. Finally, the Empress rose, her voice steady despite her evident fear. We have awakened a sleeping giant, a species that treats war like a hobby, views our technology as primitive, and adapts faster than any known life form. And now we've given them the stars. Science Director Uvex whispered what everyone was thinking. What have we done? 3 lunar cycles after the disastrous second invasion, the Galactic Hegemony did something unprecedented in its 12,000-year history. It surrendered. The official surrender ceremony took place on Earth's neutral territory, a location humans called Switzerland. Empress Celara herself arrived in an unarmed diplomatic vessel, flanked by her remaining advisors. The human delegation seemed bizarrely casual, dressed in what they called business attire rather than military uniforms or ceremonial robes. As the Empress approached the conference table with appropriate gravitas, a human female with bright red hair thrust out her hand. Judy Nakamura, United Nations Secretary General. Great to meet you. Love your bioluminescence. Is that natural or technology-assisted? Never mind, doesn't matter. Welcome to Earth. Coffee? We've got donuts too. War Minister Thorne whispered to Science Director Uvex, they're offering U.S. mild stimulants and sugar rings at our own surrender ceremony. Is this some form of psychological torture? The humans proceeded to cheerfully discuss terms with the same enthusiasm they might use for planning a birthday party. Throughout the meeting, they interrupted serious diplomatic discussions to ask questions about alien biology, share jokes about first contact, and offer tourism suggestions for when things settle down. So we were thinking, said General Maxwell Park, casually leaning back in his chair, instead of this whole surrender thing, how about we just form an interstellar federation? Share technology, cultural exchange, that kind of thing. We've already improved your FTL drives by about 60%. And our engineers have some great ideas for your terraforming tech. The Hegemony delegation exchanged horrified glances. These creatures had decimated their military, and now they were offering partnership as if the Hegemony had any choice in the matter. You would accept us as equals? The Empress asked cautiously. Well, yeah, shrugged Judy. That's kind of our thing. Unity and diversity and all that. Besides, you guys must have cool stuff to teach us too, right? No hard feelings about the invasion. First contact situations are tricky. Later that evening, as the human delegation entertained the aliens with something called a diplomatic reception involving more stimulants, sugar, and fermented beverages, a familiar figure appeared before the Empress. Admiral Korvanax, thought dead, had been captured and subsequently treated for his injuries by human medical personnel. He now served as a cultural advisor to the human military. You know the most terrifying thing about humans, Your Magnificence? Korvanax said, sipping something called bourbon that humans had assured him was perfectly safe despite containing molecules that would poison most species. They genuinely don't understand how frightening they are. They think everyone adapts this quickly, fights this enthusiastically, and forgives this easily. The Empress nodded solemnly. We are fortunate they chose mercy. Oh, it's not mercy, Korvanax laughed bitterly. They're just curious. They want to learn from us before they outpace us completely. Within a decade, they'll be teaching us technology we haven't even conceived of yet. He raised his glass in a sarcastic toast. To the Galactic Hegemony, 12,000 years of unchallenged dominance ended by a species that still thinks digital watches are pretty neat. Of all the planets in all the galaxies. We had to invade the one with the crazy apes who turn warships into shopping centers and consider planetary invasion an exciting weekend diversion. May whatever gods exist have mercy on any other empire foolish enough to threaten Earth.